The next one is Eduardo Hernandez.
Yes, Your
I'm
Honor.
assuming that's you?
Yes, Your Honor.
Wonderful. Okay, then we're off to a good start. So prior to going on the record, I've marked all the exhibits for your case. It is OAH case number 2018-101154. I'm Administrative Law Judge Kimberly Belvedere. If I could have the Deputy Attorney General identify himself again for the record.
Good morning, Your Honor. Robert Tomlin White, Deputy Attorney General, appearing on behalf of the people of the state of California, pursuant to Business and Professions Code Section 2760.1 and Government Code Section 11522.
Okay, and if you could identify yourself.
Eduardo Guerrero Hernandez, LCSW.
Okay, and I have the exhibits for your case. They are exhibits I have 1 through 4, correct?
That's what I have too, Your Honor.
Okay, and do we need any protective orders on this one?
Not that I'm aware of, Your Honor.
Okay, so Mr. Hernandez, do you have any objection to the admission of exhibits 1 through 4?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so exhibits 1 through 4 are admitted. Mr. White, would you like to make an opening statement?
Just to briefly summarize the case, Your Honor, Mr. Hernandez was issued a clinical social worker's license on February 3rd, 2017. On July 15th, 2014, an accusation was filed against his license. It was based on a conviction for DUI from May 6, 2013 that stemmed from an arrest on December 13th, 2012. It looks like there was a hearing on the matter. The record that I looked at was somewhat incomplete, but there is a decision after rejection adopted by the board that occurred on February 22nd, 2016. My records indicate the decision became effective on March 23rd, 2016, revoking and reinstating Mr. Hernandez's license on a 3-year probationary term. That probationary term was told, I believe, from July 9th, 2016 to February 2nd, 2017, because Mr. Hernandez was not working as a clinical social worker at that time. It appears during the terms of probation there were 2 probationary violations. One occurred on August 2nd, 2017, which in my record is that there was a failure to submit biological fluid, and the other one was on April 16, 2018, in which Mr. Hernandez tested positive for alcohol. I will note that the records I have indicate a subsequent second test for alcohol was negative, and that Mr. Hernandez stated that the first positive test was due to his consumption of kombucha. Hopefully I said that right.
Do you have a spelling for that?
Yes, Kombucha, and I do not claim to be an expert on that, but my very brief research is that it's a slightly alcoholic tea. This is an explanation that, according to my records, was accepted by the board as for the original positive test. Mr. Hernandez has completed his remedial education. He's had the issues I previously described on his biological fluid testing, but has otherwise been compliant. His dependency support, he has been compliant. His quarterly reports, he's been compliant. His probation monitoring costs have been paid to date, and his cost recovery, he has been fully compliant. It appears that Mr. Hernandez is asking for modification for dependency support and drug testing. I will let him elaborate on that. That is from the petition. I am not certain as to the specifics of what exact modification Mr. Hernandez is requesting.
Okay, and would you like to make an opening statement, or did you just want to go into your testimony?
Well, just the opening statement would be that I would like to modify, change, or take away the AA meetings and substance abuse biological fluid testing. So essentially modifying the terms of my probation.
Okay, so eliminating AA meetings and the testing.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and what would you like to tell the board about why they should grant your petition?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to appear in front of the board. In my profession, as a forensic social worker, a part of my role is bringing my clients in front of a parole board for them to go in front of for them to be released from custody. So it's kind of surreal, essentially kind of going in front of a board. But with that being said, it's has made me a little more comfortable. So as part of the presentations that I have for the clients is have them discuss, of course, what led up to their offense, some of the cognitive distortions that contributed to the offense, and of course where they have grown now. So that's what I would like to kind of discuss with the board today, talk about who I was at the time, and some of the contributing factors, and of course who I am now. And I do have just a bullet of a timeline over the last 6 years, because it's been almost 6 years to the date of my arrest, and it's essentially a full circle for me. At that time, of course, just a part of my childhood. I'll briefly kind of talk about my childhood. First generation American. Parents are migrant farm workers, and eventually we settled into the San Joaquin Valley. And I really am like a driven person, just seeing how my mother and father, how hard they work and how driven they are. And so that kind of plays into who I was as a person at the time. I was a single father. Most of my downtime or all of my free time was spent traveling with my son, I was a coach, and I also played at the time baseball. After collegiate baseball, I traveled a lot playing baseball, so all my free time was spent around that. So also, a part of my work as a forensic social worker, the clientele that I treated for almost a decade now is adolescent and transition age, essentially young men in custody that have committed sex offenses. So in a forensic setting, a residential setting, treating young men who have committed sex offenses. And so obviously there's a lot of hard work, a lot of dealing with your countertransference issues, very dark at times content in the groups, just a lot of stuff. And I took a lot of pride in being able to cope with that, not utilizing substances. I had a lot of coping skills. Baseball, I mentioned baseball, exercise. And so I took a lot of pride in that I didn't utilize substances to cope with work or stress. But I'm kind of leaping forward, and one thing that the insight that I have gained in this process, and I'm appreciative of the fact that I was referred to AA, because that, the inventory of the irrational thought process, and so getting that and understanding that, I look back at it, and I look back at the person that I was at the time, and although I did take a lot of pride in not utilizing substances, I realized that, okay, I made the connection saying, well, the opportunities that I had to celebrate, I would take that opportunity to kind of just take pride in, just an outlet, so to speak. Like, okay, yeah, I'm a hard worker, and that was my justification. That was the way how I allowed myself to drink in excess. And at that time, that day that I was arrested, it was a celebratory experience. there was a person that was retiring that I considered a mentor, and I know he's gonna move away, and I knew this was probably the last time I was gonna see him. So I wanted to go over there and celebrate his retirement. It was after work. I had a somewhat tough day, but of course that's not a justification. I was there, and I was there for a couple hours. Consumed quite a bit of alcohol. Obviously that's probably one of the board's concerns is my blood alcohol content level was pretty high, and connecting that to me as a driven worker, a driven person, I had to be in front of the board the next day. So I left early, and I made the extremely impulsive, just so embarrassing to say it, but just I got behind the wheel that day, and I had people offer me rides. I knew I could just pick up the phone and call 50 people would just come up, but I just didn't want to burden anybody, didn't want to ask anybody to, didn't want to call a cab, because I didn't want to leave my truck there. Just a lot of just justifications. Excuse me. Sorry. I think, aside from the fact that, I think, just going back to my thought process at the time, I felt entitled to kind of exhibit these behaviors. At that time I was really kind of, all this stuff fed into my just very distorted thought process. And that's something I've gained. If I wouldn't have gone to the meetings, I believe it's step 4, the moral inventory, and just kind of look at who I was at the time. That's why I'm really appreciative that I was, given that opportunity to go to those meetings. So that's kind of talking about the incident that day. And so since then, obviously, extremely humbling experience. Being in jail, I have friends that are also in law enforcement, they're coming up to my cell and just like, that's just one of many, kind of just from that day forward. And soon after, just that day was obviously a very sobering experience. And I just completely just stopped drinking. And I could say that my sober date is January 1st, 2013, a couple weeks after my arrest. Not to say I drank after my arrest, but I just absolutely disgusted with myself, and just alcohol was, the schema I had at the time was just celebratory. I never used it to cope and deal with life, but but that had shifted, obviously. And soon after, I met my wife in 2014, and of course I told her, I shared some, what was going on in my life at the time, and this is about a year after my arrest. Of course, I was on criminal probation and stuff like that. I mention that because obviously that stands out to me as a part of so many humbling experiences. Excuse me. A year later, going back to me being driven, I just wasn't taking care of myself, and I developed a respiratory infection and was diagnosed with valley fever in 2015, and just never really took care of myself, and that's a lot of my regret that I'm just dealing with now and through therapy, and I've learned to let that go. But looking back at that, if I would have just taken time off of work, but just that prideful, just not taking time off of work, kept going to work, I was treated, but not really followed up with. And then a year later is when it came back as a severe case of pneumonia. And my body just gave out. And eventually I developed a septic shock. And they decided to place me in a medically induced coma, in which I stayed for about 2 weeks. While I was in a coma, I had a stroke, which left me paralyzed. So obviously coming out of the coma, and the fact that I even could talk about it, it shows a lot of progress that I'm making in treatment. But coming out of the coma, just, seeing the room full of people supporting me. One of the deacons that I work with was there, and he's probably one of the first person I saw when I came out of the coma. And at that point is when I, decided to turn my life to God. And soon after, I was baptized into the Catholic Church. And obviously, my patron saint is St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes, because I felt like a lost cause. But at that time I was unlicensed, and one of the things I wanted to do, and I told myself that I was going to get licensed so I could give and offer my license to the Catholic Church. And so that's something I'm in the process of doing. Soon after I got married. And before I went into my coma, obviously, I had just recently, my wife we had just had a kid, so that was my third child. And so, obviously coming back to the house from the residential, it was just really hard. I was treated as a stroke patient, had to learn everything over again, obviously, to regain movement. And, thank to God, I was, relatively young, and essentially I was given a second chance in so many different ways. And I'm just incredibly blessed to be here. So that started my journey of physical and spiritual recovery, obviously, to which I'm still, in the process of doing. And, physically, just have a lot of impairments that I've learned to cope with through a couple sessions with a neuropsychologist. She gave me a lot of, ways to deal with this. Had to learn how to walk again, obviously, had to learn how to just daily functions. I've had a lot of complications since then. Been to the emergency room like a few times with vertigo and whatever, just a lot of different just complications. And I am pretty impaired as far as the damage that I've had. So the neuropsychologist was able to accommodate my testing when I went in front of when I went to test for my license. Got me extra time in like a private room, and so that really helped out a lot. But I was just extremely driven to get licensed, and I don't know how many hours I spent studying. But I got licensed on the first try, which is something I take a lot of pride in. And I worked hard at rehab, but I went back to work too early. As was mentioned, that my toll was only 6 months. It should have been a lot longer, but I just didn't have, my time expired. But thank God, like, people at work donated time, so that gave me another check. But I went like 3 checks, like 3 months without pay, and so obviously that just crippled my family financially. So I had to go back to work. I signed releases, medical liabilities, because I just wasn't safe to be at work. I felt like I was gonna fall every day, but I rushed. I needed to go back, and so that's why the toll was only 6 months. It should have been a lot longer. But going back and starting probation again, it was overwhelming, but I got through it. Of course, the substance abuse testing, it's difficult, but I think the most difficult for me at this time is just the financial aspect. Obviously, I mentioned that I have 3 kids. I have 1 on the way. And then I have a son in college. My wife's in college. I have 2 kids in private school. Like, it's a burden, but I'm getting through it. It would help. I would appreciate it if you guys consider it, but it would help me. And I understand the concerns that the board has as public just people concerned with public safety. I understand. I mean, I understand, but I'm here to kind of talk about who I am as a person and how I've grown, and hopefully you guys can, see my growth as a person. The AA meetings, it was hard to find like consistent AA meetings. I was always, because of time, obviously, it was a burden, just every time I leave, my son would cry and, just stuff like that. And so I would fight when I was downtime, I would search for meetings. And also to mention, there was some safety issues because of the clientele that obviously I'm in a forensic setting, essentially a prison. And so some of the guys that I saw were actually people that I saw from inside. And so, obviously it was a safe setting, but you never know what kind of day they're going to have. So I would always, not go to that place again. And it was just always but finally, after a while, I found a step study group, and I have a sponsor, someone that I've known for a very long time. And I, was texting him the other day about just how incredibly blessed I am, and, but I mentioned step 4, obviously, and I'm currently in step 11, but it's something, prayer and meditation is a big part of my life, but it's something I have the church, and, if the time is relieved, I'm going to spend more time with the church. As I mentioned, I'm going through the process of volunteering my license to the diocese, the Catholic Diocese of Stockton, and I went through as part of the process, I went through to a spiritual retreat, because I think at that time they wanted me to participate, but then come back as a therapist, as part of the team with the priest and the coordinator, but at that time because it was my wife and I, we just lost a child, and so talking about it was great, but I knew because part of that was sharing what had happened to me as far as being in a coma. I couldn't talk about it. Just these feelings rushed, and so I recognized that I needed to treat that. I needed to work on that, and so I went and started. Soon after, I went and voluntarily went to a therapist, someone I know for a long time. We started EMDR, and EMDR has been incredible. He gets a kick out of the stuff that I tell him about, the visions I had when I was in a coma, and so he connects it to my brain and my body surviving, because they weren't dark visions. They were more so just, I don't know, just people in my past, and we would connect that to how that I identify with those people. And it might have been people in the room, I don't know, but so anyways, he gets a kick out of discussing that, but it's helped me incredibly. I mean, obviously, when I couldn't talk about it. The fact that I can talk about it today just shows the progress I've made. I went in there at like a 9-10 on the anxiety. Now I've worked my way down to like a 2 or 3. Obviously, I'm here. I'm like a 2 right now, or a 3 right now, I don't know. But that work, and also he has a lot of experience with treating substance abuse clients, and so obviously we make connections in there as well. And he referred me to some online kind of classes, but it means more to appear and in person and have those discussions in person. But the meetings they're incredible, because I mean the bravery that the people in those meetings, their ability to just be so vulnerable and just disclose the stuff that they talk about is incredible, and I take a lot of courage. I see their courage, and I take a lot of, and it helps me kind of be comfortable and talk about it in there. But the meetings, obviously, I was attending a lot of them where people were just processing and talking about what they found, but I couldn't understand it because they were so far along. But then when I went to the step study groups, that's when started making a lot more sense. So with that being said, this experience has just humbled me in so many different ways. I mean, it just, and I know we're here to talk about substance abuse and my relationship with alcohol, but I have no relationship with alcohol. It's just so far removed from my life. Obviously, that incident was a very sobering experience, and I was just disgusted with myself. And one of the most humble things that I had to do was just disclose my arrest to my 18-year-old son. And I was like, I am super proud of him because I think what happened to me, you know, just, and I'll share this little experience, if that's okay. Just that he, you know, it was like a Friday night, told me he was gonna go to a party. I said, hey, and I, you know, remember I said, hey, remember what we talked about and what happened to me? And sure enough, like I couldn't sleep that night, but sure enough, around 3 a.m, my cell phone rang, and it was him. You know, I've had, you know, I think he had a few beers. I said, well, if you have one, call me, and he did. And so we went, and I was so proud. And so this is an example of how my experiences have, you know, and me wanting to pay it forward, because I went a long time without getting clinical supervision, because my department really doesn't offer it. So I got my clinical supervision through psychologists. But the second year I had to go outside of the department and seek it. And I want to bring that back to the department. Obviously, I am supervising a graduate student now, and I do talk to him about my experience and how the responsibility the license carries. And so next I have to do CEUs, and so obviously I have to do law and ethics. I think back at the time, I go back to the day of the incident, that didn't pop into my head. The obviously the decision I was making was just very impulsive, but just the significance of it long term and the people I put at risk. Obviously I just, you know, my distorted train of thought just got me behind the wheel, and but looking back at it, I just take complete responsibility for that just horrible decision I made that night. And thank God I didn't hurt anybody, but here I am now, just but I think that shame, it's a healthy shame, and I keep it there, and it's going to make me more effective as a clinician down the road. But I've learned to let it go. Like I can't change the past. What's done is done, but I could learn, I could pay my experiences forward, and hopefully contribute to social work in a positive way. So that's all I have.
Okay, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hernandez, first I'd just like to thank you for being very forthcoming and sharing all your experiences. I can tell that it's not an easy thing for you to do. I just have some basic foundationary questions, and then get into a little bit more detail. What is your current age?
41. Excuse me.
And so the DUI that occurred approximately 6 years ago, you were 35?
Yes.
And I was listening to a lot of your medical issues that you were describing. I'm not sure that I saw it in that detail in the petition, but about when did that episode begin and end?
Which episode
Well,
are you referring
you
to?
said you had valley fever,
Yes.
and it turned into...
July 2015.
Okay.
And the hospitalization was almost the exact same time the following year, July, August. I was hospitalized for about almost 2 months. Of course, the coma was and then inpatient rehabilitation was about 3 weeks.
And when was that?
I think I was released from that in August of 2016. I'm sorry, the dates I don't
That's
have it in
okay.
front of me.
Okay, and then it looks like, so it was after those incidents that you studied for and applied and were issued a license. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And how long have you been in this particular profession?
I started working for the department in 2002, and I went in as a correctional officer, and I wanted to be my title was a casework specialist, so I went to graduate school. I worked graveyards as a correctional officer and got my graduate degree, and I took on and I was able to gain my master's in 2008. So since then, so roughly a decade, I've been accruing hours for this licensure.
And I read some of the material concerning your DUI, and I understand that. I guess I'm not an expert in what your position was, but it was in law enforcement. Is
Yes.
that correct? Were you a sworn
Yes.
peace officer? Okay.
I am still a sworn peace officer.
What do you tell the people that you work with now when you bring them to the parole board about your own experience?
I don't disclose it. I disclose it to the other clinicians,
Mhm.
but because of the clientele I work with, they tend to use that information against potentially against me. Like I don't talk about the rest, but I do talk about adversity that I've been through.
Mhm.
So I don't get specific as far as details of my offense, but I do talk about, well, necessarily alcoholism. I don't talk about it because I'm in the program I'm in is a sex offense specific treatment, and so obviously if there's stuff that contributes to it, obviously alcohol is a contributing factor at times, but we don't treat that. We treat the sex offense piece, so I don't really have the opportunity to talk about it, but I more so utilize it internally, and it keeps me humble and it keeps me focused on my role as a clinician.
Yeah, I understand.
But I don't disclose the details of my arrest.
Do you? And that makes perfect sense. Kind of a bad question, but do you think it makes you a better clinician?
I do think this whole experience, and as I mentioned before, just the ability to pay my experience forward, and just to talk about what weight the graduate degree and the license carries, especially in the ethical field and law specifically. And so that experience, connecting that, and I'm going to get more training because I have to get my hours, but I've been waiting just for this, and then so I have to submit them before May, so I'm going to take more classes in law and ethics. But I have disclosed this over and over again to the other clinicians, to my supervisor, obviously stipulations. I talked about it with the student that I'm supervising, talk about it a lot, but just to the clients. And I'm really encouraged that they have a lot of confidentiality, my fellow clinicians,
Mm-hmm.
and no one has disclosed that, because it's contraindicating to their treatment. Obviously, if their treating clinician was arrested, I don't know. It's something that I just don't want to just set them back in their treatment, so I don't talk about that with the client specifically. But I have disclosed it to all the clinicians and my supervisor, everybody in there.
Okay. You talked a lot about AA and some of the benefits that it's bestowed upon you, and you are now asking that be taken away as a probationary term. Can you explain why you want that modification?
Oh, sure. Thanks for that question. And I wish I would have brought it up earlier, but I mentioned the 11th step, the prayer and meditation piece. I do that with the church, and I want to do that more with the church. So the time, that I spend with the hours that I do have, I spend in AA. I want to take that time and I want to volunteer my services with the church. I want to get closer to the church and more involved in the church. And so this time will free me up for that. So that piece, I've been through the steps. I've done the steps, but I'm in the 11th step, prayer and meditation. But I could do that with, get closer to God, and I could do that in the church. And I've gained so much insight through AA, and I'm appreciative of the people in AA, and my struggles with alcoholism. but it's just so far removed from my life. Obviously, I mean, I want to live, so I've been through so much health-wise. It's not in my life. I mean, so it's just, but to your question, I know I went off tangent, but to your question, I want to invest my time into the church and volunteer my license to the diocese.
Okay. When did you start AA?
When the terms were, sometime when they started in 2016, I believe, when the term started, that's when I first started. I don't know specifically the date,
Okay.
but it's when the terms of probation started. And at first there was a lot of, not resistance, but just I couldn't find my place. I mentioned, you know, obviously just feeling unsafe in certain meetings,
Mm-hmm.
you know, seeing guys that I knew from the inside, and it was just like, there was some safety concerns. So it was hard to find like a group where I felt safe. Not the people that, everybody's in there. I don't put myself on a hierarchy, obviously, you know, just.
No, I understand you work with a sensitive population. You indicated your sobriety date was January 1st, 2013.
Yes.
But you started AA 3 years after that. What made you, I guess, explain to me how and when you stopped drinking and what that decision process.
Well, just the impact of this arrest, just, you know, just that experience. Just when I was, you know, using alcohol as, you know, celebratory, you know, obviously in parties. This was a retirement party. I didn't use it to cope with life, never have, and I never will. I take a lot of pride in that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because I was so driven and so hardworking, the times when I was, you know, in a celebratory setting, I would, you know, justify, you know, a few more drinks by, you know, I deserve it, or I work hard, or whatever kind of scheme I had. And so, but I just the impact in my life of what happened, the arrest, just that alone, just because, you know, and, you know, the friends I had, you know, I just told them, you know, obviously I didn't share obviously my arrest with everybody, but I just stopped drinking, and I mean, obviously, you know, they were fine. Like, there was no pressure. I mean, it's, you know, well, I'm in my 40s or 30s, and you know, it's, you know, I understand the peer pressure piece is tough for someone, you know,
Mm-hmm.
younger in age, but I just made that decision, and ultimately, you know, the medical issues I had, it just wasn't.
Understand.
But the sobriety piece, that was just a decision I made. I didn't really need the support. I just made the decision, but then obviously being in the meetings, I gained a lot more insight into how I justified, you know, those extra drinks or whatever, and the people that I harmed with my behavior.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
You said that you drank for celebratory reasons, but you're in AA and it's been beneficial and you're on the 11th step. I mean, do you believe that you, at least previously, had, you know, alcoholism problem?
Well, yes, I do, and that's something at first I didn't really understand it, but then through the meetings, through, you know, the discussions I've had with my therapist now, I do know at the time, yes, you know, obviously I had contact with law enforcement. That's a part of the DSM. I think it was taken out though, but I do say, okay, that I do have a problem, and I recognize that, and it's there, and it's something you know, it's going to be there, obviously, but I just, my life has changed so much in so many different ways. It's not a part of my life at all.
Okay, I just
Never
have a
will be.
couple more questions. Sure. Sounds like you have a lot going on, and you're asking the board to reduce your probationary terms. And from what you've told me, it sounds like you want to continue your AA through church. What other coping mechanisms do you have for stress that you might encounter with your kids and medical problems and whatnot?
Well, I mean, that's always going to be there, but, you know, obviously, not so much the AA piece, but what I've done, and with my clinician, or excuse me, the therapist that I'm seeing now, you know, obviously the EMDR, you learn grounding techniques, coping skills, obviously deep breathing, ways to, and I was doing that back there. I have this little grounding technique, and it's amazing because, all the internal noise kind of goes away. And so, but I have a lot of strong coping skills, obviously. When I'm having a hard day at work, I go home and, I see my family, I see my sons smile, and everything goes away. Obviously, the coping skill of bringing my family closer, bringing God closer, is essentially my number one coping skill. Prayer and meditation. Every night, I do a daily inventory, and it's a conversation I'm having with God, and what were my slip ups that day? When did I get angry or whatever? And I pray on it, and I move on. And it's something, it's ongoing, and it's never going to end. I just want to bring that closer. And time-wise, financially-wise, that's the reason for this. Obviously, you mentioned I'm a sworn peace officer. If someone has a concern, I'll be ordered to go submit right then, and I have to be there submitting within a half hour.
Well, there's a question that I feel compelled to ask,
Sure.
Given the medical history that you disclosed. Are you required to take any current medication because of that?
No.
So you're not taking any medication?
No. When I came out of the hospital, they had me on pain medication. But as soon as I went in front of a doctor, I said, hey, will there be any risk of me stopping this? And they're like, no. I just immediately stopped it. I'm scared to death of, opioids and pain medication. So it was gabapentin at the time.
So, just so I have make sure I have clear, you haven't had any alcohol since 2013, and then I'm assuming once you came out of your coma around 2016, no other meds.
No. I mean, like I said, the gabapentin was a part of the resident, the inpatient physical therapy program. But as soon as I came out, they continued that. And I like I mentioned earlier, I went to the emergency room for, obviously just what I thought was, issues with my heart, but it was more so anxiety related, and then obviously vertigo a couple times, and over the counter kind of nausea medication for that.
Okay.
But nothing that I'm prescribing now.
And just because it's probably gonna get asked anyway, it looks like you, and I have no reason to disbelieve anything you've told me, but that you missed a biological fluid test. Was there a reason for that?
Well, I think that there, I could not make it because at the time the previous provider, if you didn't get to your the site before 5 o'clock, you could not test. But now with the new provider, I could go to a hospital. It doesn't matter. I could go after 5 o'clock. So I think it was that, if I remember correctly, there were back-to-back days, and I could not get. It was hard for me to get out because the first day, obviously my supervisor let me go because I'm in a place where I have to be on post and I can't leave without their permission. But the next day, I couldn't leave because there was significant violence in the institution that day, so I had to stay there, and so I could not make it. I tried to make it. I was a little bit late, and they closed, so I was not able to submit.
So it's a logistical issue.
Well, that's what it was, and I think I mentioned it to the probation.
Okay.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Just one last question, because I want to let the board ask their questions. You've provided an awful lot of testimony, been very forthcoming, but just can you give some assurances to the board that this type of behavior would never happen, that you wouldn't relapse again, that the stress wouldn't get to you, and something like that that your original DUI wouldn't occur again?
Of course. I mean, I have nothing but, I mean, I could sit here and obviously I'm just a completely different person from 6 years ago, spiritually, physically, just mentally, just my thought process is completely different. And I do have a lot of, I guess, it's not just myself, my family, my son, we have one on the way, I have 3 kids, my daughter, 3 kids expecting our 4th. It's just, I would not let them down. I have to model appropriate behavior, not only to my family, but just to the public. I've taken on this license, and I understand it's a you know, I'm an example to the public, and I take a lot of pride in that. And with that being said, I mean, I the board has my word that I will not even, well, one thing, consume alcohol, but much less, you know, get behind the wheel and do that again. It was impulsive. It was one of the biggest mistakes. Well, it is the biggest mistake of my life, and just think about it daily. But I'm learning to kind of let that go. It's always going to be there, but I hang on to it and have it always as a reminder of what can be lost with just impulsive decisions. And so, I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. I have nothing further.
Okay. Then if the board has any questions, again, starting on my left.
Alexander Kim, public member. So you mentioned about seeing your neuropsychologist. What sorts of therapy besides physical? I mean,
It was not therapy. It was just 2 sessions. More so, at that time I was somewhat acute, just coming out of residential. So it was more so like, more so kind of how to cope with my impairment. And she gave me some really good skills that I still use, obviously, because, you know, there was a lot of damage to my brain. And so just the skill sets that she taught me. But it was only 2 sessions. And I've left that provider, and actually I actually was referred again to see another neurologist just to see where I'm at, how much damage and how well my brain has recovered. It was a pretty significant stroke, and so obviously just you know, just the fact that I'm here, and that was a part of it, was her encouragement. Because at that time, one thing I disclosed to her is like I just wanted to let everything go. I didn't care anymore, but it was her encouragement. And I remember reaching out to her as soon as I was licensed. I sent her email, and obviously I left that provider at the time, but you know, she was really, you know, congratulatory and everything. But it was, you know, her and, you know, people within my church, the prayers that got me to, you know, pursue it.
thank you. Congratulations on your recovery.
Thank you.
Vica Stout, MFT member. Thank you for sharing your journey, and very impressed with many of your accomplishments. I still see you as a driven individual, so I am wondering what you do now for celebration and how you enjoy life.
Oh my God, just obviously you know, just the day trips I could take with my family, you know, putting a smile on their face is my satisfaction out of life. Being able to provide for them is kind of where I get my satisfaction. Hopefully, you know, I haven't been able to take a vacation because of this probation. You know, I didn't want to go out there and, you know, have to submit, you know, while I'm trying to relax. Like, so I owe it to my wife just to take her somewhere. So down the road, you know, maybe next year. But as far as celebratory, I mean, I don't know, like, I plan to have a bowl of pho after this. So if you guys have any recommendations, of restaurants nearby, and so that's how I celebrate, is obviously just the simple things in life. I mean, I'm around people that drink, but they've accepted that my sobriety, and there's no resentment, there's no anger, there's no nothing. I mean, it's just this is who I am now, so.
Thank you.
So how long have you been in therapy? I noticed it wasn't part of your stipulation, so you did that on your own.
Yes.
How long have you been in therapy this time?
3 months, 4 months, something
4
like that.
months?
Something like that, 3 months or so. And if you guys want, you know, of course, I could ask them to submit if you guys need it, but I didn't want to ask them that because we're just kind of preparing for this hearing and just kind of doing some more EMDR stuff, relaxation stuff, you know, surrounding this. So.
Yeah. I wanted to get some clarification. You were saying you're supervising a student. Is that toward
Yes.
their hours? No. Oh, okay.
He's in grad school.
Okay. And then, if it feels appropriate, I know you said that you want to replace the time that you're spending doing AA with church activities, and you're kind of broad about it, like volunteering. Is there a specific thing that
Yes.
you wanted to engage in for
Yes.
your growth? Yeah.
I was in the process of volunteering my services, and the rector of the diocese, she had a few things in mind, but obviously I just kind of, and I mentioned that I was in the process of volunteering. I went to the sanctuary, and it's San Damiano. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that in Danville. It's a beautiful place, but I was there as part of the spiritual retreat, so that was a part of me volunteering. And I talked to her after, and she had a couple things that she wanted me to do. Specifically, the diocese wanted to incorporate something in conjunction with the district attorney as far as treating offenders of human trafficking, and that is my specialty. Obviously, I've been dealing with offenders for a decade now, so she wanted to utilize me in that regard. So once I have more free time, I'll be able to just provide counseling services, and eventually this license is I want to keep it. I want to hang on to it because when I leave the Department of Corrections, I want to go and use this and work for the church for full time. So this is a part of that process, and it's going to be small. Obviously, it's going to be just maybe an hour or two a week, but over long term, I want to be able to possibly work for them. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize it was such a clinical component to the diocese, and she kind of shared everything that's provided, all the different services.
And you had mentioned that you have a sponsor. Would you continue working with that sponsor when you're out
Of course,
no longer
yes.
doing your 12 steps?
Yes, he's a dear friend of mine.
Okay.
And so I just had a text conversation with him a couple of days ago, and he's, he lives so far from me, so we can keep in contact. And he lives in, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, I'm in Stockton, he's in Merced. It's like a little away, little bit of a drive, but we communicate a lot, and I'll spend some time with him real soon.
Okay, thank you.
Christina Wall, LCSW member,
Hi.
and thank you very much for sharing your life journey.
Thank
And it seems like you've been through definitely a lot of I would say that kind of like a trauma in your life, dealing with the medical stuff, and and I'm very glad to see you here today. So just some clarification, so you mentioned about the date, when you get the DUI. Then the next day you are going to interview with the board?
Okay.
That's what I heard.
Yes.
So what board it is?
Okay, so it's a parole board.
Parole board.
It was not me. I was representing a client in front of the parole board. So I know I had a big hearing the next day, so that's why I left early so I could go home and get some rest. And I still made it. I mean, I went from county jail. A couple hours later, I was in front of the parole board. Just driven, like.
Talk about embarrassment, huh?
Oh my God! Yeah.
So that's what I thought, that you're referring to the parole board.
Okay.
Because of it's work related. So the other thing is about you did talk about the countertransference because of the particular population that you deal with.
Yes.
So how do you handle this now? Now there is no alcohol, and you're so driven, and so how do you deal with it?
Well, countertransference, that's something I always am cognizant of. I always know that, okay, why am I getting an emotional reaction of what he's saying, or what is it about this person? But I've learned that through the training. Now I always taking that inventory when I'm, always, just, it's something that's daily. Obviously, if there's a group that I conduct and some disclosures are made, and I find myself, kind of getting emotional or angry, whatever the reason, I always sit back and have a conversation with another therapist, and we'll discuss that, and we'll say what are the issues. And so I've learned so much, but one thing that I took a lot of pride in was that I'd never, after like a hard day at work, went home and cope with it by using alcohol. Mm-hmm. But as I mentioned, when I get an environment that's celebratory, that's those justifications of that hard work was like, okay, I felt entitled to have a couple more than I should. But that's who I was. Who I am now is just not a part of that's not a part of who I am.
So the last question I have is just to follow up with the therapy question. I know it's not in your stipulation at all, and I'm so glad that you're doing, you were doing EMDR, and it looks like, a lot of good, outcome. So are you currently still seeing the therapist?
Yes.
So that's still going on. Do you intend to
Yes.
keep that going?
Yes.
Okay. That's all it is. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have one question. You've asked for, Betty Conley, LEP member. You've asked that we take away the biological fluid testing and the requirement for the AA attendance. After that, there's not much left. And I guess I'm looking at it, it looks like even with your toll, your probation is going to end in about September of 2019, so less than a year. Is there a reason that you're not just asking for early termination of probation?
Well, I could not, from what I understand. You have to, it's one step. I have to ask for, the next step would be early termination. That's the process, from what I understand.
I think we can talk about that
We'll talk about it
afterwards.
later.
Yeah.
Okay,
thank
so
you.
that, if
That
that
would be nice.
had
That
been
would be
an
nice.
option, you would have requested that.
May I request it? I'm not sure.
I don't know, apparently we're looking in the back, but,
Well, I'll make sure I
so
request it
just,
later.
so essentially, if you could, you would.
Oh, of course. I mean, I would like nothing else to take that from my license, and because I have logged on and saw that my status is probationary, and that's, I mean, I understand the concerns that you got, that the board has. When the probation was placed, obviously it's there for a reason. It's to safeguard the public, and I have no intentions of harming the public. Matter of fact, I just, this license is just to, provide services and help those in need. And so, with that being said, it's just a matter of time before the probation ends. But this, what I'm asking for today is just to help financially with my family and time-wise. That's the biggest thing I can offer to my family is my time and obviously the support.
I too want to recognize the work that you've done and the efforts you made. They're impressive.
Christine Whittlesbach, public member. Yes, very impressive. So, real quick question. I just want to clarify your testimony because I'm just a little confused. So, you want to stop going to AA so you can spend more time with the church, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you'll continue working with your sponsor on the steps. Is that what you said?
We'll have those conversations, but
Okay.
it's more so like self-inventory kind of
Gotcha.
questions. Or when I talk to them, we talk about, I don't talk about relapse.
Got
We
it.
just talk about, of course, where we're at and
Okay.
and just what we always talk about how incredibly blessed we both are.
Okay, gotcha. So, have you run this idea by your sponsor about not coming to AA anymore?
Yeah.
And what does he think?
I mean, he understands it. My growth. He has known me for 15 years.
Yeah.
And it's one thing that he started going to AA a few years ago, but it's something that we never talked about. But then I disclosed to him because we were friends before this probation, obviously, and I talked to him about going to meetings, and that's when he's like, oh yeah, and I asked him to be a sponsor, and so he said yes, and but it's always going to be there. I mean, it's there. I mean, I know I have a good grasp of the steps, but obviously the self-inventory is something that's lifelong, and that's something I do through prayer and
Gotcha.
meditation.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Maddox, MFT member. I just have a couple questions. So, what led you to start going to therapy just a couple of months ago?
When I went to
Briefly. I'm sorry.
No,
I'll
it's
just
fi-
say
it's-
briefly.
No, okay, that's fine. When I went to the spiritual retreat,
Mhm.
the fact that I couldn't even disclose, I just automatically, I said, okay, well, I need to do some work here, talking about me being in a coma, because that's one of the things I wanted to leave at the sanctuary and replace with some other strength, but I just couldn't talk about it. And so I was like, okay, yeah, and that's when I went and sought treatment.
Okay. So, if I'm understanding correctly, the the you beginning therapy was connected to the medical challenges that you haven't been in the coma and haven't had those experiences, and not the DUI. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It is just the fact that I had just that significant trauma that I knew I needed to deal with.
Thank you.
And so and being able to, the fact that I'm even talking right now about it has shown the progress I made.
It's
But
very admirable.
also,
yes.
but we do talk about my issues with alcohol, and he has given me a lot more insight.
Sure.
And so.
Okay. And then just one other question I have, because I actually live in the Bay Area also, and so I know one of the key components of having a sponsor is being able to meet consistently face to face, because over the phone, it's easier to hide. And so I'm wondering, what consideration have you given to find a sponsor closer to Stockton? Merced and Stockton, that's a trek. And so I don't know what consideration you've given to finding a sponsor closer to home.
Well, I have not, to be honest with you. I haven't really considered anybody close to home. I can. I mean, I just one thing. There's a look in my group. Then there's someone that I actually am going to consider now, because I know you are right that I think you have to, because it's part of it, like them holding you accountable. And so, but the accountability piece is something that I see my family as holding me accountable. And so, that being said, yeah, I'm going to consider that. I'm gonna see if I can find a sponsor closer to home.
Sure. And as you're aware, a sponsor can hold you accountable in ways that maybe a wife or a cousin or somebody else may not be able to, because the sponsor has the experience of having working their recovery. So, I mean, that's just something to consider. Someone find someone closer to home. But thank you.
Yeah, thank
no
you.
further questions.
Thank you.
Gabriel Lamb, LCSW member. Just like the other board members, I would just like to congratulate you on your growth. And I really have no questions, just one comment. Stop drinking kombucha. That's awful stuff. I'm joking.
It's expensive too.
I've never even heard of that. Oh, okay. I will not be doing it today, though. Okay. You didn't have any other questions, right? Okay. Any other follow-up questions from the board? Okay. Any other cross-examination?
No.
Okay. Would you like to add anything to your testimony?
Well, early termination, if it's possible.
I think they'll talk about that. I'm not positive. I don't think you have to do a petition for modification before you apply for early termination, but since they are here and it's been noticed for a petition for modification, I don't think it can be switched. If it can, they'll discuss that, but just so you know.
Thank you.
Okay, did you want to make any type of a closing argument at all?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to be in front of the board, to appear. I'm really grateful, extremely blessed to be here, and just thank you for the time.
Okay, any closing from the Deputy Attorney General?
We submit here.
Okay, so then it's submitted and I just need a page count. Okay, and my understanding is that you do want to take a lunch break, correct? Okay, so it's 12:30. We'll be back at 1:30.
Thank you.
I was told that's what we're doing.
Which is the best
Oh, thank you. You know any Vietnamese places around here?
Anyway.
Vietnamese places?
No, I live in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
So I don't.
Okay. So Miss Kelly, if I think that's you back there. Back on the record, it is still November 29th. I am still Administrative Law Judge Kimberly Belvedere. That hasn't changed. This is going to be the petition for reinstatement of the license for Eileen Kelly. The OAH case number on this one is 2018-101153. If I could have the Deputy Attorney General introduce himself.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Robert Tomlin White, Deputy Attorney General, appearing on behalf of the people of the state of California, pursuant to Business and Professions Code Section 2760.1 and Government Code Section 11522.
Okay, and if you could identify yourself, ma'am.
My name is Eileen Kelly.
Okay, and thank you for patiently waiting through the other 5 cases. Appreciate that. I know it's not fun to sit through all of this, but anyway, so you've kind of seen how the cases have proceeded, and I see from the record you've been here before. So what we'll do is we'll take an opening statement from the Deputy Attorney General if he would like to make one.
Yes, Your Honor. Again, I will briefly summarize the facts and kind of reserve any potential arguments towards the end. But in this case, Ms. Kelly, on December 11th, 1992, was issued a licensed marriage and family therapist license. On November 11th, 2013, accusation was filed against Ms. Kelly due to her inability to practice safely as the result of a finding of a mental illness that was found by a board-appointed psychologist. The accusation was properly served on November 20th, 2013. It was not responded to, and on May 22nd, 2014, a default order and decision was entered, along with a cost assessment of $3,162.50. Ms. Kelly then applied for reinstatement on 2 different occasions. First was denied on January 6, 2016, and the second was denied on July 7th, 2017. On July 15th, 2018, Ms. Kelly filed the present petition for reinstatement. Given that is Ms. Kelly's burden to prove a rehabilitation and safety to practice, I will, like I said, submit any potential argument towards the end and allow her to make her case.
Okay, and would you like to make an opening statement or just provide your testimony?
I have some evidence.
Okay, what did you bring with you?
I brought a letter from my psychologist, Donald Goodman. I have it right here. 14 copies.
Okay, does the board have any objections, or would you like to take a moment and review it? Well, first of all, how many copies did you bring?
14.
Okay, would you like to take a moment and review it? Okay, why don't you bring them up and pass them out to the board? And while he's doing that, we do have exhibits 1 through 7 in this case. So any objections to the admission of exhibits 1 through 7?
Fine.
And Your Honor, for the record, I would note that Exhibit 3 requires a protective order pursuant to California Code of Regulations Title 1, Section 1030 and Government Code Section 11517.
Okay. Well, first, do you have any objections to 1 through 7?
No.
Okay, so exhibits 1 through 7 are admitted. Exhibits 3 and 4, right? No, just exhibit 3 only?
Exhibit 3, according to my records, yes, 4 and 5 are the actual petitions
But
that
I mean,
spoke of
for
earlier.
the,
Exhibit 3 is a psychological evaluation, which I believe should be protected from public record.
so for the protective order, it's just 3 only, yes?
That's what I'm requesting, Your Honor.
Okay, so that's granted, so exhibit 3 will be admitted subject to the protective order. And again, like you've heard, ma'am, before, that's to make sure that that won't be disclosed to the public if anybody ever requests records of this case.
Okay, I understand.
So if you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Okay, now you filed this petition for reinstatement. In a petition for reinstatement, rehabilitation, since the license has been revoked, is the #1 most important thing that the board looks at. So what would you like to tell the board about any rehabilitation or reason why your license should be reinstated?
Well, I think the letter from my psychologist says it all.
Okay. Do you have any testimony you'd like to add?
No, I do not.
Okay, does the board have any objection, or does the Deputy Attorney General have any objection if the letter is added to her petition documents?
Your Honor, before I make any sort of position on that, or take any position on that, I'd like to read it. I was just handed a copy of it, if that's okay.
Okay. Have you had a chance to review it?
Yes, I have, Your Honor.
Okay, any objection to the admission of this document?
I have no objection to the admission of it to the record, Your Honor.
Okay, and the board has no objections, correct? Nope, okay. So what I'll do is I will add this to the end of Exhibit 1, and it is a one-page letter from Dr. Don Goodman, clinical psychologist. Okay, and I think you said you had no testimony you wanted to give?
Well, I have appeared before the board several times. The first time, my license was revoked because I hadn't changed my address. I didn't get that notice. That was my fault. I didn't change my address. So I got notified after the board had already made a decision. I have been back so many times to appear before many of you. I am a good marriage and family therapist. I have treated many people. I have helped people. You know, as Dr. Goodman states, I'm an intelligent woman. I don't know what else to tell you.
Okay, well, why don't we move on to cross-examination, and if you think of anything afterwards
Sure.
that you want to add, you can do that then, okay?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Kelly, you've made this petition before, so would it be accurate for me to believe that you understand how procedurally this works?
Yes, I understand.
Okay. So do you understand that you carry a burden of proving an element to the board in order to be reinstated?
Yes, the last time I appeared, I had gone to a psychiatrist, Dr. Jason Conji. He sent a letter to the board. I didn't see it. He mailed it to them. No one brought it with them. I'm sorry that that happened, but this time I brought it with me. I understand. I have to prove my case. That's what I'm attempting to do.
Okay, and what are you trying to prove?
I'm trying to prove that I am eligible and I have met all the conditions that the board has asked me to meet.
So one of the things that you're required to prove in order to have your petition granted is that you have been rehabilitated, and you need to prove that by a clear and convincing standard of evidence. So, what evidence? And let me back up for a second. I've read the letter that you've provided. Yes. That's part of the record for the board to consider. But I want to ask you. You have an opportunity here to testify. What evidence can you provide to the board that you have been rehabilitated since the original finding that you were not safe to practice?
Okay. The original findings were based upon a forensic psychologist. He didn't test me. He passed me off to a psych assistant. I passed those tests.
Let me just stop you for a second, because we're not going to go back into re-examining the original finding. Okay. Let's just assume, for today's purposes, that finding was accurate. You can have your own feelings about it, and I'm sure you do, but what we need to find out today is what has happened since that finding to now that would constitute evidence of rehabilitation to prove.
I understand your question. I have been in therapy. I mean, I've always gone to therapy. I was first in therapy with Maureen Finkel. Then I changed and went to, let's see, I can't tell you how many therapists I've had.
Why don't you tell me about what the therapy consisted of and how it helped you?
I started at the beginning, when I was born. I went through my whole life. Part of my life has been very sad. When I was little.
Ms. Kelly,
I understand.
I just want to focus your testimony on the events that have occurred since the finding in 2013.
That's when I started
the last 5 years.
Yes.
What have you done in that therapy?
I was with Maureen Finkel for about 3 years. That was until 2016 when I started with Dr. Goodman.
What did you and Ms. Finkel talk about?
We talked about my life. Mm-hmm. We talked about I was depressed. I had anxiety. She really helped me.
And you believe that has rehabilitated you?
Oh, totally.
And why do you believe that?
First of all, I believe that every therapist should have therapy. If you can't solve your own problems, then you go to therapy. It's different when you're sitting in a therapist chair. How can you help someone when you haven't even helped yourself? So I believe that.
With that belief, how have you helped yourself?
By going to therapy. I have understood so much that happened in my life. I mean, I don't want to tell you, but I have been truly helped by being in therapy.
Okay, well, we're trying to determine whether or not you have established by clear and convincing evidence that you are now safe to practice with a license. And what we need to know is how you've been rehabilitated and the changes that you've made and the progress that you've made. And your answers at the moment don't shed a lot of light on that. I want to qualify this by saying I'm not asking for your life story, not that that doesn't have a component to it.
Of course.
But this is your opportunity to explain to the board what efforts you've undertaken to be rehabilitated, why you are now safe to practice as a therapist. And so I will ask you generally and essentially leave it at that if that's how you want to proceed. But can you please explain to the board how you have been rehabilitated and why you are currently safe to practice as a licensed therapist?
I think I understand your question, okay? I think I have been rehabilitated through a process of cognitive behavioral therapy, through a process of Gestalt. I needed help. I sought the help I needed, not because the board told me, but because I believed I needed help. I have received help.
Let me ask you a couple
Okay.
of just specific questions. You filed a petition in 2016,
Yes.
or maybe you filed in 2015, but it was denied in January 2016. What has changed since then?
I've continued the process of being in therapy.
Okay.
There's people who go to therapy, okay? I didn't just go. It's like I sought it out. I knew I needed some assistance. I received the assistance of Dr. Goodman. He has really helped me.
When did you start to see Dr. Goodman?
2016.
Okay. So you filed another petition in 2017.
Yes.
Were you currently seeing Dr. Goodman at that time?
Yes.
And
At first, I saw him every week.
let me ask you another question. Did he write a letter for the 2017 petition?
No, he wrote this letter, I don't know, October, I think.
So if I was to ask you what had changed between your 2017 petition and the current petition that we are here for right now, would this letter constitute that? Would this letter constitute the extent of what you have done?
Yes, I've been in therapy since July 2016.
Okay. And would you like to elaborate on that therapy anymore?
Well, at first when I went, he taught me how to breathe. You know, I mean, I've taught that to clients. You breathe in, you let it go. I learned to let go of my pain.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Okay, if the board has any questions, back to my right, if you have any.
Yes, I do. Gabriel Lam, LCSW member. Before I ask the questions, I do have a question for council. Is it appropriate for me to ask about her mental health? About her history of mental health?
Are you directing that question at me?
Well, yes, or maybe
Is it based on something in here? Yeah, probably your counsel. There's nothing wrong with, and you can correct me if you have something else. There's nothing wrong to ask her about how her mental health is. If she currently suffers from any mental health. If we're going to start getting into what she may have discussed with her psychotherapist, other than what's in the reports, that's kind of treading into areas, because that would be protected to a point.
Okay,
But we'll let you know if there's something that's not appropriate.
fair enough. Miss Kelly, my understanding is that you suffer from depression and anxiety. Is that correct?
More anxiety than depression.
Is anxiety something that still goes on in your life?
No, not anymore.
How are you currently dealing with stressors and maybe a certain level of anxiety?
I deal with it just like Dr. Goodman taught me.
And how is that? Could you?
I take a deep breath in, I blow it out. I let it go.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not quite sure how to, what seems to be before me is because of the address issue,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And there was no forwarding address,
Right.
there was no response.
Well, I was in practice upstairs. That was the address, that was my address of record. But then I moved downstairs. I didn't change my address.
Okay, but I'm just trying to go through the steps of why we're here today. The issue was the address.
Yes.
It was technically, you're in the top.
I have 15 days to change my address. I did not do that.
Correct, but as a result, this is why this was revoked, because you didn't respond back to the board. Is that correct? Okay, so I think what I was hearing, and that's why we're here today, because you want to get your license back.
Yes.
So correct me, anybody, if I'm off base, okay? Because I'm trying to get the sequence of the activity here. So what my question is, and I think that the attorney was asking was, since that took place, that's been a span now of, what, almost 4 years?
5 years.
Yeah. What evidence do you have, I'll just speak for me, that we should give the license back? Because you're here asking for the license back.
That's correct.
So I need some evidence that you could provide for me that would convince me to give it back to you. Because at this point, it's been revoked.
Doctors promise they will do no harm. I have never, ever harmed a client. I have helped clients. I have helped thousands of people. I want to provide help for those who seek help. I specialized in adults molested as children. I have helped many, many, many people. I listen. I'm an excellent listener. I hear what you're asking me. But to answer in a couple of sentences, I don't know how to answer that. A couple of sentences? It's sort of like people come and they expect me to solve their problem. I tell them I'm here to help you solve your problem. I don't solve problems. They aren't my problems. They're their problems.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Maddox. I'm an MFT member, and I want to thank you for coming today.
Thank you for listening.
You're welcome. I have one question, I think, and let me know if this is beyond the pale. Could you talk to us as a board, to me and us as a board? Could you share your understanding of why the board felt it necessary to take the step of revoking your license? What's your understanding of that?
What's my understanding of why the board took my license?
No,
No.
not took your license. Let me restate the question.
Okay.
What is your understanding of why the board had to take the unfortunate step of revoking your license?
Well, my understanding is that someone told the board that I was unfit to practice.
Okay.
I think I know who that was.
Okay.
She threatened to get my license.
Okay.
And she was successful.
Okay.
She was a former marriage and family therapist.
Okay. So maybe we can go a little deeper. What is your understanding of the concerns or the particular
Okay.
concerns that would have led her to do that?
She's a very angry woman.
Okay.
She threatened my license. I said, "You're going to get my license? I'll take yours." I didn't know that she had retired her license.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Sorry, but that's my opinion.
Christine Wittlisbach, public member. Hi, Miss Kelly. I do remember you. Welcome back.
Thanks.
I just have one
I
question.
hope this is the last time.
That would be
Not
nice.
that I don't like you, but I'm getting tired of this.
Okay. I just have one question. Have you seen any clients since you've been on probation?
Have I?
Or not
Oh,
probation, since you've had
No,
your license
no.
revoked? Sorry.
I immediately
Okay.
stopped as soon as I was notified.
Okay.
After you had already taken my license.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have no questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Chiu. I'm a public member. Are you aware of what the board's original accusation against you was?
I'm aware.
Yeah. What is your understanding of that original accusation?
As I said before, someone unnamed thought that I was unfit to practice.
So are you aware in the accusation, the board stated that you were evaluated by a board appointed and approved psychologist, and the forensic psychological examination was performed, and the finding was that it was found that you were not competent to safely practice as a marriage and family therapist?
That was Dr. Carl Belding. That was his finding.
So you're aware of that finding?
Yes, of course.
So I guess what we're asking is, since that accusation was made, what you have done to show us that you have been rehabilitated.
Okay, Dr. Carl Belding is a forensic psychologist. He didn't do any testing. He gave me to his psych assistant. I took the test, computer, paper, pencil. She said I did very well. He then called me on the phone, asked a couple of questions, and then he said, well, I'll call you again. Or call me, he says. So I called him. He asked a couple other questions. That was the extent of my contact with Dr. Carl Belden. He was too busy. He was going off to testify in the court.
May I remind you, my original question is, what have you done since?
I have been in therapy since 2012.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Christina Wall, LCSW member, and just want to thank you for coming to the board and
You're welcome.
explain your case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any additional board questions from anyone? Nothing? Any additional cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, is there anything you would like to add?
Well, I'd like to say how much I appreciate the Board of Behavioral Sciences. I know that you are here to protect the welfare of people who come to see the therapist. If you're a social worker, an MFT, the Board of Psychology, they protect people. I just wouldn't want your job. Frankly, that would be very hard for me. Very hard. But I really appreciate the service that you provide for the state of California. So I'd just like to thank each and every one of you. Especially the president.
Okay, any closing argument from the Deputy Attorney General?
Yes, Your Honor. First, I just want to state that I'm not here in the adversarial capacity. I'm here representing the people of the state of California in the interest of protecting public safety. And in that regard, one of the questions that the board asked, Ms. Brown referenced the default as the beginning, and perhaps everybody's understanding what occurred, but it actually began with a psychological evaluation that occurred on 3 of them: June 22nd, 2012, July 16th, 2012, and July 22nd, 2012. And those evaluations concluded that Ms. Kelly was not safe to practice. Following that, an accusation was filed on the basis of the finding of the prior psychological evaluations. That accusation was not responded to, which resulted in the default. And in that regard, I would simply mention that it is a licensee's duty to keep a current address on file with the board, specifically for the reason that if there is any sort of official correspondence, a default wouldn't occur. There would be a response and a notice and an opportunity to be heard. But it wasn't responded to. There was a revocation, and there have been now 3 petitions to reinstate. Given the legal posture of the case, the petitioner carries an evidentiary burden here. And on behalf of the people of the state of California, it's my duty to argue that that evidentiary standard has not been met, that the petitioner needs to show that she has been rehabilitated with clear and convincing evidence that she is safe to practice. And while I also appreciate petitioner putting forth the effort to file a petition and come and appear before the board and subject herself to questioning and testimony. I do not feel that what she has submitted passes that evidentiary burden to the point where the board should be able to safely assume that she can practice safely and conclude that that evidentiary burden has been met. So with that, the people of the state of California would argue that this petition should be denied.
Okay, I have a question.
What's your question?
I have a question for you. You're saying I haven't proven that I have been rehabilitated. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, you're not allowed to ask him questions. That's not how the procedure works, but if you would like to, since you have the burden, if you would like to make a rebuttal closing argument and respond to any argument he made, you are allowed to do that if you would like to. So he's saying that you have not submitted sufficient evidence. If you think you have, what would your response to that be?
Well, as I said in the beginning, I think this letter means something. I think that Dr. Goodman Maureen Finkel, I don't know if Maureen made a statement, but I was seeing her for many years. Like, I think 2012 I went to see her. She's a licensed clinical social worker. She's an excellent therapist.
Okay, so you think you have provided sufficient evidence to meet your burden, correct?
I believe that I have.
Okay.
I don't know what else I could provide.
Okay, any other closing?
If someone would tell me what else I need, I'd be happy to provide it. I've answered all the questions that I've been asked. He's recommending that that my petition be denied.
Okay, then, unless there's anything else from the board, nothing, okay, then the matter will be submitted on the record. And I just need a page count for this one. Okay. Okay, so what'll happen now, and this is actually true for all the petitions, I have 30 days to write the board's decision. I'm not a decision maker in the case. The board's going to now retire to their executive session. So we'll have the room closed, so you won't know the response today. I know you've been through this process
60
before.
days.
I'm sorry?
60
Yes.
days.
Well, the board has time. I have 30 days to write their decision, and then they have time beyond that. So, so we just need to clear the room, and thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for waiting. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good.
Thanks. I guess I need it.
Well, you know, I mean, I have a job to do, so I gotta say what I gotta say. But I wish you the best of luck and
Thank you.
whatever comes.
I'm older and I'm wiser.
Thank you for reminding me of my job.
And I didn't have anything with breaks because I didn't.
Where's my
No, we don't need to. So with that, we are going to move into closed session. The board will reconvene in open session tomorrow at 8:30. With that, we are in closed.